This presentation is underwritten by Resource Bank as a gift to the community. DeKalb County, rich in tradition, history, personality, and blessings. Agriculture, industry, and education form the bedrock upon which the community is formed. Today, this area of northern Illinois enjoys exceptional growth, abundant job opportunities, outstanding health care, and quality government. Students from every continent come to DeKalb County for a world-class education. Today's growth and prosperity are forever tied to our past, a time when the highways were paths and two-track passages on a prairie grass sea navigated by pioneers and stagecoaches. It was a simpler time when the lines between community and family were blurred. At the core was hard work, faith, honesty, and a true concern for those around you. The thread that tied many communities together were the one-room schoolhouses that dotted the countryside and the people they touched. This is their story. The area between the Fox and Rock Rivers was open for settlement at the close of the Black Hawk War in 1832. Needing to establish transportation from the lead mines of Galena to Chicago, a road was established from what is today Naperville across the Fox River, through the Somonauk area, toward Paw Paw, and finally to the Rock River at Dixon. That thoroughfare made transit possible throughout the area. It is thought that the first settler's dwelling was built in the summer of 1834 by a trapper, and that the first settlement was established later that year. 2 years later, in the winter of 1836 to 1837, the area's first school was taught by Lucius Frisbee. These one-room schoolhouses and the teachers who served in them laid the educational foundation on which our community is built. One-room schoolhouses were far from remarkable in their architecture. Some served as many as 60 children in a space as small as 18 by 24 feet. Most schools had a typical attendance of 20 to 25 students, although that number could swell in the winter months as boys weren't needed as much on the farm for planting and harvest. Except in the very earliest days, no student had to travel much over 2 miles to school. Most walked a mile or less. 1870 to 1940 was the golden age for one-room schools in DeKalb County. These schools served the tightly knit community surrounding them well. While every schoolhouse was unique, many of these rooms shared common features. A flag, to which the Pledge of Allegiance was said each morning, and photos of Presidents Washington and Lincoln had places of honor on the front wall. Most desks were fixed to the floor, with small-sized desks in the front of the classroom and larger ones in the rear. Every schoolhouse varied in features and opulence from one to the next, with most serving in a utilitarian manner.
Shabana Grove. This district has the best house in town. It stands on high ground, and when the bell shall be raised to its place, its tones, messengers of good, will visit each house, kindly inviting the children to come to school. A step here has been taken in the right direction. A blackboard 5 feet wide extends around the entire room. No one in the county is better supplied. This board can be made to teach in 100 different ways.
The Sycamore True Republican, January 11th, 1871.
The walls of the stone schoolhouse stand firm as a rock, but the inner part is gradually wasting away by natural wear and the operations of rough usage. The premises are destitute of fence, shade trees, and outbuildings. The last of these is not the fault of the district, but of the boys who have attended the school prior to this winter. When will such vandalism cease?
The Sycamore True Republican, December 29th, 1869.
The Pleasant Hill School building is too small and so near the road that a person sitting in his carriage can almost take hold of the door handle. There's no blackboard worthy of the name.
January 8, 1870.
The building was 18 by 20 feet in size and set on blocks about which the earth was banked. A wood stove stood about 7 feet from the south end. It was not very warm. We wore cowhide boots. The boys wore no underwear. Some of us never heard of underwear until after we were grown, but we sometimes put on 2 pairs of pantaloons.
The Salmanac Book. These humble buildings were remarkable for their output. Many of DeKalb County's finest minds, the men and women who laid the social and economic foundation enjoyed today, passed through these buildings. As many as 200 one-room schoolhouses dotted the county, with schools both opening and closing based solely on the students and families that surrounded them. Later schools and town schools based their location on a more regional approach. With one-room schoolhouses, though, if there were no kids in the area, the school would be closed. To understand these buildings, we need to understand the community they served. The average person's world was geographically much smaller than today. Without the communications and transportation systems we have now, life was spent closer to home with fewer outside influences. Schools served homogeneous groups, families, congregations, neighbors, and friends. In fact, many early schools were built by churches or families to serve their own.
When harvest was there, yes, we would miss school. But the teacher understood that. She made sure that we got our education anyhow. Even then when we came back, it's just kind of like I didn't enjoy missing school because I knew I had to make up for it anyhow when I got back. But yeah, we did. We helped when the harvest was there.
If you were needed on the farm, if you didn't go to school for 2 weeks during harvest season, it was no big deal. The teacher would send you home a lesson schedule. You'd do your work on the farm, and then you'd come in at night and you'd do your lessons, and then after 2 weeks you'd turn it all in.
These buildings served many roles beyond education. Many schools were a central meeting place for a rural population and were often located at a crossroads, making access quick and easy. That convenience led many schools to see duty as houses of worship, wedding chapels, social event centers, dance halls, theaters, polls, and even distribution centers for war rations. For everything today's classrooms offer, complete libraries, computer labs, multimedia, specialists, it was the simplicity of the one-room schools that bound the community together. The tight spaces and shared lessons by students across 8 different age groups enriched relationships. Student registers show a great consistency of names from year to year. Siblings and neighbors knew from one year to the next who they would be spending their days with, what each other's mother would have packed for lunch, and who was the most fleet of foot for an inning of baseball or a game of Ante-I over. There was a sense of security in that familiarity and sameness from day to day. Teachers knew their students, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their dreams.
When you get to know the families and the children, it's like one big family.
I think you knew your people really better. You do, I know, of course I went to the school right down here. I knew everybody that lived in every house. And I'm sure all the others in the district did too.
They were all neighbors. You know, like the Conlons next door, and Blakes were on the other side over there, and the Angstroms and all those on there. Bachlan's south of the school, and the Twomleys west of the school. Sure, you knew all the parents and all the kids, the whole family.
There's one thing about a rural school. You become a family.
There were a few male teachers. However, the typical one-room school teacher was a young, often single woman with a few years of school, minimal prior experience, and a big heart for kids. The challenges facing teachers were many. They were charged with teaching wide-ranging age groups and multiple subjects, plus they were solely responsible for the school building and everything in it.
That for the consideration hereinafter set forth, said teacher agrees to teach, govern, and conduct the common school of said district to the best of her ability, to keep a register of the daily attendance and studies of each pupil belonging to said school, and other such records as said director may require, to make all reports required by law, and to see that the schoolhouse, grounds, furniture, apparatus, and such other district property as may come under the immediate care and control of said teacher is not unnecessarily damaged or destroyed. Said teacher agrees to perform such duties for a term of 9 months for a sum of $85 per month.
The DeKalb County Teacher Contract, 1939.
You throw in the teacher to one of these, you clean the schoolhouse in the fall of the year, and you are the custodian. So you are the custodian plus the teacher plus everything else.
When you were a country school teacher, you were a teacher first of all. You were a nurse. You had to settle disputes on the playground. You're a janitor, but you were a little of everything.
It was rough, and you couldn't write lesson plans as you would today because you had too many grades and everything, and you had to combine the entire class at times. And beside that, we had to be the janitor and the fireman and go across the road to get the water. I mean, it wasn't easy, and yet I was happy.
From banking the fire the night before, gathering water from a nearby farm first thing in the morning, and staying until the last child went home, these special teachers labored for minimal pay. Nearby, at what is today Northern Illinois University, teachers trained at what was then Northern Illinois Normal School, or State Teachers College. It wasn't until much later that a 4-year degree was needed to teach.
I was planning to be married. And the two of them said, doesn't make any difference to us if you want to. And he spoke up. He said, doesn't make any difference to me, but he said, if you get pregnant, you're out. He said, I'm not having a pregnant woman stand in front of my boys. And I said, well, I remember that.
They asked you if you smoked. If you did, you were out before they even talked to you anymore. That was one of the questions. And some schools, not in mine, but in some consolidated schools where the teachers had to live there, they had to even teach Sunday school in the little rural churches.
The college was there. There just wasn't the money to go anyplace else. I think we paid $5 a semester, and there were 4 semesters to the year.
She kind of zeroed on each one of us as individuals, and she figured out which one of us were having trouble, not having trouble. And it was kind of like she'd take us off to one side, even though it was one classroom, we'd be off to one side and she'd be teaching us certain things that we weren't, picking up on.
I didn't care for her arithmetic. And there was an 8th grade boy who was very good in arithmetic. And that was my worry, that he would catch me on a problem. So I would take the arithmetic book home at night and work on the problems, the thought problems. And my dad was very good in mathematics. And so we would work the problems out, and I would have them so that Charlie couldn't catch me.
Like so many teachers today, these men and women were passionate about their role molding a generation. Written as an ode to a retiring one-room school teacher, later read to Christa McAuliffe by then-President Ronald Reagan, these words capture the vital role of teachers of yesterday and today. You are the molders of their dreams, the gods who build or crush their young beliefs of right or wrong. You are the spark that sets aflame the poet's hand, or lights the flame in some singer's song. You are the gods of young, the very young. You are the guardian of a million dreams. Your every smile or frown can heal or pierce a heart. You are 100 lives, 1,000 lives. Yours is the pride of loving them, the sorrow too. Your patient work, your touch, make you the God of hope that fills their souls with dreams and makes those dreams come true. While parents and churches built the building and teachers fanned the flames of both hearth and heart, the students of a rural school paint a portrait of a time that will never be recaptured. Just getting to school was sometimes an adventure.
I had a Plymouth, and I started picking up 2 boys about a couple of miles from school, 2 or 3 miles from school. Then I went down the road and I picked up, 5 kids. Then I went around the corner and picked up 4 more. I don't know how we all got in that car. They sat on top of each other, but we did, so that they wouldn't have to walk to school in the cold.
It was only about a half a mile away, so I rode up there with the milkman as he'd pick up the milk at our house every day.
I had wonderful neighbors who lived beyond me, of where I lived, and came by my house or by the lane. We lived up a lane, and they came by, and every time they came by with their horse and buggy or whatever they rode, they would have me go with them. So I was privileged.
Whether by foot, horseback, or shared ride, the students would pile into school at the sound of the bell. Often girls hung their coats on one side and boys on the other. Lunches, often in pails, were neatly stacked. The temperature outside would dictate how the morning got started. Schoolhouses were cooled only by the shade of a well-placed tree and a chance breeze, and warmed only by stoves or furnaces that made for cold mornings in the winter months.
I have strong memories of cold feet, walking a mile to school, as the fire had just gotten started in the heating stove. The teacher had sympathy for us and our cold feet. She would remedy this by playing march music on the phonograph and have us march around the room to warm us and our feet. Of course, then it happened. We would get warm, and because we wore double bodies, woolen underwear and woolen socks, we'd get too warm.
Kenneth Marsh, Memories of North Grove School, 1921 to 1926.
There was music to start the day usually. And then when we had a few minutes of that to kind of get us going, we'd all settle down. And then we started with our reading classes first, I would say. And then we went into math.
You made out a schedule, and we started on that schedule right the first day, and we stuck right to it. They knew exactly when their class was going to be and exactly how many minutes, because we couldn't go over because you run into the next class. And the teachers used to say that during the wintertime when you had to go and put a piece of coal in the stove, you had to miss a class. It was so tight, the schedule was so tight.
The class was called to order with the Pledge of Allegiance, often followed by a song. Once underway, the day would fall into a tight schedule. Imagine now teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic across 8 grade levels, often class by class, age group by age group. Students would meet at a recitation bench at the front of the classroom. Reading and writing would often start the day, with each class getting 10 minutes with the teacher while others listened and performed seat work. After a morning recess of 15 minutes, the students would return for language and arithmetic, again often arranged in age groups, each again spending 10 minutes at a time with the teacher. After lunch and opening exercises, the afternoon might cover spelling, geography, science, or current affairs. When students needed a break, the teacher may have told them an interesting story, often from the pioneer days or from any of a number of books in the library that they rotated with other rural schools. These teachers mastered juggling different ages and classes. The students themselves played an active role in the education inside the classroom. The repetition of students hearing both younger and older students recite their work and mentoring by older students are most often cited as the cornerstones of success in the rural classroom.
Well, normally she'd take one class or maybe 2 classes up to the front of the room and work with them, and then everybody else and the rest of that wasn't up there could listen and learn from that. And I learned a lot by listening to the older classes, I thought. I thought it was kind of interesting, because they were learning interesting things, more interesting than what I was, I guess.
They learned everything, and they learned from one another. Like the first and second graders would listen to the older ones and learn that way too.
They had to come up to the front, and there were benches up in the front where we held the little class, and the whole school would hear our recitations, but not too loud, but enough so that I think the more times they heard the lesson, the wiser they got.
Like children today, though, school memories are not framed by coursework, but rather by friendships and time spent outside of the teacher's direct gaze. Social times of recess and lunchtime, as well as special programs, are among the fondest memories.
They all brought their own lunches, and I had a 2-burner electric plate and a very large dishpan, which I would put on with water in it to heat the minute I got to school in the morning, so that it would be hot. And they would bring jars with cocoa in it, and we would put that in there and let them get warm so that they would have something warm to drink at noon.
Annie and I overthrow the ball over the roof and stand on the other side and wait for it to come down. That was fun. Red Rover, and break the chain.
In a one-room school, you were friends with everyone, and there weren't that many kids to play with, so at recess you all played together, and the older kids kind of watched out for us younger ones, and so you got to be friends with everyone, and the age difference didn't matter.
We always had a Christmas play. That was a big deal, and the school actually was a social thing too, amongst other things, because the farmers, other than the church and the school, there wasn't a whole lot of other deviation they could do. We had the school plays, we had picnic days where we'd get 2 or 3 one-room schools together, because again, we were only a few miles apart. And I'm sure that every year, although I can't remember exactly where our destinations were, but we always did a field trip.
The greatest thing we always had, we'd always put on a Christmas play every year. And we had a little, we'd pair up, like I say, a couple of you'd have this part to say and somebody else has some other part to say. And that was always quite a thing in the wintertime, like I say, it was our big Christmas party. And we had popcorn balls and different things that the people would bring and we'd pass around. And then we'd always sing the Christmas songs. And we always had a good time at our Christmas party. That was one of our main things at our country school.
One-room schools recount a time of a simpler life, of tougher times for many, and of what for today's children seems a completely different world.
Carefree times is what I remember, and I often thought, nowadays it seems like parents will tell their children, oh, the times are so bad, you can't have this, you can't have that, and never heard that. And what's right through the Depression, never heard that at all, It's like they kept all these worrisome things away from us, let us grow up normally, I'd call it. I was very grateful for that.
Back then, we didn't have much. In fact, I really never knew we were poor until I got in high school, when I saw other kids. In country school, I think we all felt we were the same. I really did. We never saw the rich kid or the poor kid or anything like that.
You were made accountable. I don't think kids are made accountable in school so much today. I mean, the teacher came out and said, this is your lesson, this will be done tomorrow. If you didn't, there was dire circumstances. You were the one that was responsible for making sure that this classroom would be warm tomorrow, or that be the case. Heaven help you if you didn't. As you got older in a one-room school, you knew that you had greater responsibility for setting an example for those younger people.
My dad's first car was 1919, and I was 10 years old, and I could remember standing up in the back, and he was trying to shift into the right place and everything. Being a kid, I knew where it should go and all this and that, and I'd think, come on, Dad, do this and that. And we'd push it in and out of the corn crib to begin with because we were afraid to drive it in and back it out, So, I mean, I'm happy to think that I started with nothing and have enjoyed all these things that have been invented since then.
I had one little girl who just loved, I put plants in little animal containers and put them on the windowsill. And this one little girl, just every morning she'd come in and she'd go over and touch them and just seemed to love them so. And so I asked her if she'd like to water the plants for me, and yes, she would, so she did. Well, I had an occasion later to go to the home, and I understood why. I never saw such a bare home in my life. I don't know how that mother ever got by. They had so little, they were so poor. And and the other children didn't seem to mind. I used to take extra little something that was like a fancy cookie or something like that. And I'd say, Virgine, I just can't eat this. I've had all I can eat. Would you like to eat it? And give her a little treat. Because I understood then why she was acting that way. She loved beauty and didn't have it.
By the mid-40s, the number of one-room schoolhouses in DeKalb County was in decline. Students were being brought to nearby schools or to town by bus and taxi. In 1951, only 12 country schools remained. And in 1957, for the first time in over a century, the last one-room schoolhouse in DeKalb County fell silent. Today, many of the schools are no longer standing. Some have been turned into homes and other structures. A few are lovingly preserved as a testament to one-room schoolhouses and the people who set the foundation for those they will never know. one can't help but be moved by the peace and the inevitable pull toward reflection when surrounded by these buildings. It is a call to a simple life. The quiet and openness that surrounds the few remaining schools whispers of a less complex time, a community bound by hardship and enduring grace. Pioneers, doctors, politicians, nurses, farmers, inventors, mothers and fathers, servicemen and women, retailers and clergy, all passed through and were formed by these times, these buildings, and those that touched them. One room, one people. With gratitude, the testimony lives forever.